Bueno, tengan todos muy buenos días. Un saludo cordial de la Secretaría Ejecutiva de la Conferencia Regional sobre Inmigración.
Welcome, everyone. We welcome, this is Luis Alonso Solano, Executive Secretary of the RCM, as Fabio actually mentioned, and a few technical specifications for this platform, just to remind you that you can select right now the language of your preference under the simultaneous interpretation button in the lower left-hand side. Also in the messaging, in the chat tab, you can also write down your name and organization so we can have the attendance and any further comments. And in the operator tab, that will be simply or merely for any technical issues you might have. Once again, good morning, and thank you so much for being with us in the virtual online courses on labor migration, the challenge of economic recovery from the public and private sector contributions. So this is virtual course number 2, public initiatives for the ethical recruitment and the labor integration of migrants. So this activity is carried out with the support of the IOM, the ILO, the UNPD, and also the International Organization of Employment. So of all of them, thank you so much for your sponsorship, and welcome all the member states from the RCM, observing organizations, and civil society organizations represented through RCOM. We cordially welcome all the organizations of employment that accompany us today and associates from the employment agency. Thank you so much for being with us today morning. So I will pass the floor to Fabio Jimenez from IOM. He will present the panel members for today, as well as our colleagues from IOM. And further on, I will come back in for the Q&A section. So once again, thank you so much. And we're here at your service. Thank you so much, Luis. Very nice of you. I just want to verify that if you can see the presentation. Yes, we can actually see it. Thank you so much. Well, good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for being here to the second webinar of this cycle that we actually developed together with IoT, ILO, PNUD, and the RCM, and also from the pro-temporary presidency of Costa Rica. Now, the labor migration, it's not a recent issue in IOM. It's not new. We've had a series of advances and works from actually several years now. And in this short presentation, I just want to see the overview of these advances and so we can just see the highlights of the sessions today, so we can actually start directly with Miquela's presentations and for the rest of the panel members. So in the RCM, we've had advances from 2006 with the collection of different works and addressing the public and private sectors in regards to labor migration. Also completion of work on temporary workers, which has been a quite interesting issue for the region. In 2012, we had a memory of the workshop seminary to strengthen the capacities of the consular authorities to protect the labor rights of migrants, of migrant workers. And as a matter of fact, there's a document, there's a product in the webpage from the RCM that you can actually refer to later on. Now, in the past recent years, in 2018, we had the workshop, the consular workshop in Panama, and the workshop on labor migration governance that was carried out in Mexico. So these issues, you can see, have been of interest of the countries and the contemporary presidencies, and also from the technical secretariat. In 2019, in matters of labor migration, we actually carried out the regional workshop on governance, on labor migration governance, equitable hiring and prevention of fraudulent practices from IOM and ILO, and something that happened which is quite important is all the work carried out by the Secretariat to actually relaunch the work, the way that we work, and the structure of the RCM. And within this framework, something more important is the group on labor migration, which has been worked with. We're working on several activities, and one is precisely the one that we're in today. So there's the virtual sessions that we're seeing with the employers, So the economic recovery with labor migration, with the public sector and companies. So this cycle of video conferences has a following logic. So we started last week with the first virtual conference. It's a very wealthy of contributions of ideas from the employment sector. So the IOE and several organizations and employment organizations that actually were represented that day actually made the comments about the priorities and expectations of how an adaptation or improvement to this can actually contribute towards the economic contribution in these complicated times. So from the employment sector, we're going to start with this. In today's section, especially, we're going to know is several initiatives of collaboration between the government and the employment sector and private sector to improve the labor migration management and recruitment from the migrant sector. So that's the core issue that Michaela is going to develop in a matter of minutes. And next week, we will conclude this cycle of webinars with a conference dedicated exclusively of what tools, what methodologies, and what resources do we have available, we have developed from the international organizations, from ILO, PNUD, IOM, to contribute towards labor migration and economic recovery from the governments and also from the different sectors. This is a logic that we followed in the cycle of webinars. So what we have done is to respond to your needs and priorities that have been identified in a survey prior to this cycle of conferences. So from the answers that we actually received for today, a good portion of the countries that or people that responded to the survey actually commented that there is a coordination in migration policy matters from the employment sector that participates actively. So 12 of the answers actually indicate yes, that from the 28 that were received. However, 4 of those answers for the countries, it does not exist, and 4 they're in process of formation for these mechanisms, and 8 of these did not identify, did not know if this type of coordination mechanism existed in the country. So we actually wanted to dedicate today on a core issue based on those mechanisms and spaces of coordinations or those public-private initiatives, so that we can, that together from the employment sector, government, and of course from the civil society and international organizations and labor organizations, of course, can actually together develop the different actions required to update the standards that regulate labor migration currently, especially in the context like that we are seeing this year. So I asked you in the previous, if those standards that regulate the labor migration should and somehow be updated to respond to the recent trends and needs of the labor markets. And the answer that we received from participants was effectively actually confirm the needs to actually update those standards. 23 out of 28 received indicate that the current standards from labor migration or the regulated labor migration do not correspond to the recent trends and needs of the markets. And I actually want to conclude with this brief introduction or this brief overview, just mentioning to the survey that was presented by IOM last week, in which it actually reflected several effects of the current pandemic of COVID-19 in the migrant population, especially from Central America and Mexico. And you can receive this later on, you see the study, but particularly related to labor migration. This study, or this survey rather, confirmed that 8 out of 10 migrants that actually sent remittances actually reduced the amount of the remittances amounts due to the fact that many have actually lost their jobs and don't have sufficient resources for this. 7 out of 10 of those that were surveyed that stopped sending remittances actually confirm that they've actually stopped sending the remittances due to the pandemic. A quite significant number, half of the migrants that responded to the survey affirms that they actually lost their employment due to the pandemic, and 22 of these, which is quite interesting, actually mentioned or informed that they've actually started endeavors with a resilient strategy due to this current situation of the pandemic. Now, today's session that we're going to approach or address several aspects, but especially what we want to do is to actually pay attention to those innovative initiatives from the government in matters of labor migration, and how are they being impacted from the different instruments and mechanisms from labor migration due to the pandemic, and how are they adapting, and what answers, what are the deficiencies and obstacles that they need to confront to manage labor migration under this different or difficult situations, and what can be and what can be shared and what practice can be shared, and by using these coordination methods to improve the labor migration, considering the needs of the market. Thank you so much to the panel members that actually joined us today. And I will introduce Micaela Machiavello, she's responsible of doing an introduction before listening to the panel members. Micaela, if you are ready. So first, let me introduce Micaela. She actually works as a regional specialist in labor migration and human development in the regional office from the IOM in San Jose, Costa Rica. She is an officer who is responsible for North America, Central America, and the Caribbean. Her previous work, Micaela, she specialized in assistance provisioning, protection of vulnerable migrants, focusing on trafficking victims, including those that are in situations of crisis. She's also worked in issues related to migration, border management in the Caribbean. She's actually trained civil staff personnel for maintenance in the university for peace in the University of Legon in Ghana, and also on refugees in Uganda, and also associate investigator from the studies refugee studies centers from the University of Oxford, and she also has a master's in migration studies from the University of Sussex, UK, and also in Eastern Studies and African Studies. Thank you so much and welcome. Thank you so much. It's a pleasure to actually see everyone. I'm going to share my screen, if you don't mind, so that everyone can see my presentation. Fabio, can you confirm if you see my screen, please? Yes, right now we see it perfectly. Thank you so much, Micaela. Perfect. So once again, welcome everyone. Good morning. It's a pleasure to actually listen your kind words, Fabio. Very encouraging to see that the 12 of the answers actually indicate that there is a mechanism of coordination between the public and private sector, because it's precisely what we actually require to actually provide an answer to the current crisis that we are seeing right now, and also to actually focus on what the after is going to be for this crisis. So in this very brief presentation, I am going to attempt to actually provide a brief introduction of the session that we're going to have with our panel members today. And specifically, we're going to see the benefits and the challenges from labor migration. I think more or less everyone knows about this. And then after, I'm going to highlight with a few examples, general examples, the importance of the intersectoral collaboration, not just the public-private, but also considering the civil society and the donors and the UN, and a few examples to provide a more concrete example of what we are actually talking about. So with that said, when we talk about labor migration, we talk about clearly about the benefits that can actually see the different partners, and also challenges. And we talk about benefits for migrants clearly because we've seen with them in several research that we actually carried out, or investigations that we can carry out, but other academic and non-academic organizations, they can actually register an increase of salary from 6 to 9 times greater from their country of origin. And they acquire new skills and competences, and clearly the access a better lifestyle for you, and also for the countries of origin and the community as well. There are benefits that are clearly strong for the country of origin of these migrant workers, because the fact that they actually migrate actually reduces the pressure on unemployment, and the countries of origin, they actually are benefited by the remittances, and also by the transfer of skills that have been acquired by the migrants. And also, and this is very clear in the destination countries, the labor migration contributes to the lack of the workforce, and also contributes skilled labor for the different works that the majority of the workers from the national workforce they are not available at that moment. Now, right now we're going to see the challenges. In this, we need to highlight that precisely that the migration presents not just benefits, but also certain challenges, and that we have to be completely up to date to see exactly how we can actually confront this and how to improve this. First of all, we know that during a crisis situation, also during normal situations, when we have labor migrants coming in and a migrant workforce, they have a trend to actually concentrate in geographic areas and labor areas that could provide work insecurity for their local workforce. And this is a reality that has been experimented in almost all countries that actually receive labor migrants. It's specifically, the workforce is actually in a situation that's not that they're in a situation of in a worse situation in which they're actually obligated or forced to actually compete in the market labor with migrants. And this is the case of the workforce of the country, of the destination, the national workforce, that simply does not have greater skills, or they don't have capacities, and for the majority they already work in the informal sector. However, it's very important to actually highlight that a few of them actually win with the arrival of these migrant workers. For example, there are several studies, actually recent studies, that from the World Bank that actually indicate that the local workforce, which is highly qualified, highly skilled, normally actually benefited from immigration. So they, thanks to this foreign from these migrants, that can actually go up, and they actually reach work spheres that are much higher. So the challenge is the following. So how can we actually maximize the benefits from migration and also minimize the challenges? So what we need to highlight is that the interaction of several stakeholders, public and private, is absolutely vital to actually achieve, to maximize the benefits and to minimize the challenges. In particular, like I actually said through my in my introduction, I'm talking about the public sector, particularly by the government from the engaged countries and the destination and countries of origin of that labor migrant. Um, and in the private sector, we're talking about the different companies and small and large size companies, from civil society, of course, and from the NGOs as well, but also from associations like ours, like the ILO and PNUD, associations or agencies from the UN, from donors, and also we have another one because I put an etc. because the list is in there. It's the important thing is to consider that the collaboration by the intersectoral collaboration is absolutely critical to actually achieve this. And effectively, I actually indicate that to actually achieve this, overcome this challenge, the core of this challenge, we actually find the importance that policies actually have, the immigration policies actually have, that should always be designed considering the different labor markets available. And because of this, we highlight the fact that a dialogue, a continuous and regular and ongoing dialogue between the private and public sector is absolutely essential to continue to inform the public sector about the needs from the private sector and clearly from the economy of the country. Now, I actually want to see with you a few examples of what we consider to actually consider as an activity to respond to these challenges and to actually get the maximum benefit and also minimize as much as possible the different challenges. So the first one, as I mentioned in my previous screen, is the need to actually monitor regularly the status of the national labor market to specifically understand the needs of the national workforce and also from migrants and who for the private sector can actually do this very well. The ongoing dialogue with the sector, from the public sector, and also from civil society, and also from the NGOs, and also from the UN, and obviously the from the governments, from the donor governments. And then it's also important to actually focus on a search of employers interested specifically on helping migrants or refugees, like we've done in our region in collaboration with a few associations or NGOs. For example, the Tent Foundation, which is focused specifically on actually seeking employers that had their doors open to migrants and to refugees as well. Obviously, also the different work employment organizations that actually depend on the national workforce, but also consider and have their door open to migrants, which is something that we're actually doing in several of the countries of Latin America. Then afterwards, a specialty from the ILO is the fact of actually focusing on modifying the existing educational systems so that these can actually be offered to the youth of the local workforce and the new skills so they can actually um, try to avoid to compete in their own labor market with the migrant workers, and they can also have the possibilities of actually going up and increasing their labor focus or improving their work, and also the strengthening of the capacities of the national employment offices, so they can also consider the national workforce, but also the different skills that they have thanks to that migrant workforce. Now, I actually want to see with you the need of the vital importance of the intersectoral cooperation during and after COVID-19. And I need to highlight during and after because we all well know that this crisis is not going to go as fast as we thought, especially in our region where many countries are still uh, in their cases are actually going up, and deaths, unfortunately, as well are going up. So we need to consider an acting on this recommendation like right now. It's a crisis that we simply have no idea how long it's going to take. So the recommendation need this now and to actually apply these right now. Why? Because I believe that even though this has been a very strong impact for every single sector of migrants and governments, the UN, the private sector, effectively, we can actually say that the current crisis of COVID-19 has also presented new opportunities of actually building and rebuilding a bit better. So I truly believe, and we've seen this so far with the excellent collaboration that we actually developed among the different sector, private and public, UN, and civil society. We see that the collaboration that has been a bit better and actually virtual during the response period to this crisis has been absolutely critical to actually confront the different challenges and to actually prepare to a post-COVID situation. So, for example, why not think about a rebuilding our economies, and that it could be a lot better from what we had before, and a bit more inclusive, and this I want to highlight about the need about thinking of social protection from migrants for a simple reason, because once migrants have access to social security, everyone benefits. The countries actually benefit, the destination countries actually benefit. The benefits of actually come to the countries of origin and clearly to migrants. And when migrants actually are benefited, then the local population is also benefited as well. So everyone is benefited from this. Also, finally, we actually start to think about a broader a better recognition. And this is very simple because we recognizing the competence of the migrants, everyone is benefited. And first off, the countries of this nation, they can actually enjoy of new competences that the majority of the times they actually need these new competences, and they haven't invested in these. Migrants are migrants. They come and provide their competences and their skills, and they provide these in a very open way once they come into the country. So a recognition of competences and an access, an open access to the markets, to the labor markets, to the formal labor markets actually benefits everyone. Also clearly to migrants and also to the countries of origin. And then after, finally, we consider the possibility of actually having a greater opportunities for labor migration for these labor migrants. In other words, provide the possibilities that these migrants can actually migrate in a regular way to benefit once again everyone, the economy, of course. We also need to consider that once we have great opportunities on regular migration, the destination countries, they don't have to focus so much on the development of restrictive measures, of course, for the regular migration. Why? Because by increasing the opportunities of labor migration, automatically there's a possibility that the irregular migration actually might go down, and also a intersectoral cooperation is absolutely critical to actually foster the ethical and equitable recruitment of the countries of this nation and also the countries of origin, because sometimes these are also countries of this nation and also of origin. I'm sorry, you have 2 minutes left. Thank you so much, Mika. You have 2 minutes left. So we'll see precisely two more slides just to give you precise examples, so you can actually so you can see the examples that I gave. So we need to consider that between Costa Rica and Panama, there's exchange. Well, Costa Rica actually receives from Panama labor migrants for coffee, for coffee harvesting, and not just coffee harvesting. That recently, even though this agreement was signed over 10 years ago between Panama and Costa Rica, if I'm correct, at the beginning of 2018. This agreement was actually improved between Costa Rica and Panama, including provisions for medical examinations for these migrant workers. And this significantly helped the migrant workers during the COVID period. So another example that I actually want to highlight that we have in our region is the example from the ethical recruitment that's carried out between a pilot project between Canada and the Philippines that's done during this period after the applied directives by the IOM for employers and recruitment agencies, in particular in regards to COVID. And this is an initiative that simply cannot function without the close relationship between employers and the recruitment agencies from the workforce, international workforce in the Philippines and in Canada, the local governments, in other words, in the Philippines and in Canada, of course, and civil society, of course. Now, with this, I finished my presentation, and I'm here for any questions you might have during the Q&A session to provide more information. Thank you so much, and welcome the rest of the panel members. Again, thank you so much. Quite interesting your presentation. I think it actually provokes a lot more questions that we will see with the other presentations, and I think it's very valuable. The emphasis that you see of actually coordinating between the sectors, from the public and private sectors, to actually potentiate the benefits and also to attend the challenges that we actually have. Thank you so much, and we hope that you can actually be with us with the rest of the section for any questions they might have. So we'll welcome Mr. Wilfredo Lozano. Wilfredo, are you in? Just I want to remind you if you can actually request to speak in that blue button, in the lower blue button, if you can actually request to speak, please, so we can actually provide you access. Thank you so much, Wilfredo. So I'm going to introduce Dr. Wilfredo Lozano. He is a current director of the National Institute. So Wilfredo, he actually works in Santo Domingo, and he has a social science. He has a social science specialty in sociology, and he's the founding director from the Dominican program for Flaxo and also for Latin America. He's the founder and director from the Investigation and Social Studies Center from the Ibero-American University in Santo Domingo. He's a National Award of Social Sciences in 2010, issued by the Corripio Foundation, and national corresponding member of the Dominican Academy of History. He has a long history in teaching in several universities from the Dominican Republic and universities from the Latin American region, through Flaxo particularly. Among those, we have the Sociology Studies Center in Mexico, the Higher Education in Diplomatic and Consular Studies, and he's been an invited professor in Mexico, in Flaxo. He has over 30 published books, 16 of these as co-author, and a dozen of these on migrational issues. So, Wilfredo, thank you so much for being with us today and for providing you with your time. And you had the floor. Thank you. Thank you, Fabio. First off, I want to thank IOM for your invitation. Unfortunately, I just came on board in this institute, and I haven't had much time. Maybe I've been here for just 2 days as a director, so I haven't had time to actually provide enough time as to this. But let me see exactly what I can do. Okay, in general, the issues that you have in the framework of from this dialogue, I would say that the integration, migrant integration into civil society is crucial. So I think this is a very complex issue, a very broad issue. It can be approached in several different ways. In my intervention, I'm going to try to address 6 core issues. First off, I'm going to attempt to actually convey to you a bit of information on the weight of migration in the Dominican population and its general impact in the labor market. Now, second, I'm going to try to focus on consequently to see how this labor is actually distributed in the general framework of the production of the country. And third off, I will be very interested in to provide a few ideas on different sectors where the major concentration of migrants are in the distribution of this PEA. In fourth is to recover a few of the findings that we can call the dynamics of the demand. And there's a few studies that IOM has actually financed here in the Dominican Republic. The fifth point is maybe a few ideas that actually emerge from the impact of the pandemic in this scenario that we're actually talking about right now. And finally, to talk or to actually highlight a few possibilities of a logic of social inclusion that can be articulated in the sense of the intervention of Ms. Machiavello that came before me. Um, so, as many of you as you know, or you know that the Dominican phenomena, I'm gonna have to say certain things that are actually basic. So, first off, the Dominican Republic is very particular in the sense that it's a migration country. Um, we have about 2 million Dominicans that actually live abroad, and 800 and something thousand people that migrants and descendants of migrants. So the important thing of my point is uh, is not the dimension of the numbers, but from the migration part of this, the Dominicans that actually live abroad actually contribute about $7 billion a year through remittances, and this is about 5% of the GDP. That is actually quite important to this issue, and we'll see this when we actually discuss the issue about the pandemic. So, in the case of migration, we all know that that is actually focused on the population of the Haitian population. Now, the important thing about this is that historically, the Haitian migrant population in the country actually started coming into the country in the migration circuit um, during during the North American occupation at the beginning of the century. And from that point, there's a labor market was articulated with very interesting characteristics, and basically in based on the sugar industry. So this was just changed, and now we have a more diverse migration where the migrants have actually been diversified. Their logic of insertion into the country has been diversified, and it's not concentrated so much on sugar, but it goes throughout the agricultural sector. Is significantly focused on construction. It has important weight on the formal urban economy. Now, within this framework, I had to say that there's about two sectors that are dominant of the migrant concentration in the country, especially from Haiti. And these are basically the construction and agriculture. In the agriculture sector, this labor is concentrated in products of high demand and seasonal, like like coffee harvesting and banana harvesting and a few other crops as well. But in the case of construction, there's a series, a bit of seasonality to this, but it's not defined so much by nature, but it's defined the by the complex relationship of the different stages that the construction processes of the construction of buildings. For example, uh, when they actually build buildings for apartment complexes, for example, there's a first phase of high demand of manual labor that they have very rugged work by digging out trenches and whatnot. There's a second phase which is quite harsh, where they actually start to actually see national workers come in, and there's a higher demand of qualified skilled labor, which is at the very end stage, the final stage, which we'll see a very significant presence or a high presence of national labor. But however, throughout time in the past 30 years, we've actually been observing within this framework. There's a series of let's call it um, uh, learned skills that has been quite skilled or probably skilled to certain migrants, potentiating their insertion into the country based on that demand. So this is a very interesting portion of this. Now, this description actually indicates a a point that I cannot mention because of my time constraints, but it is worth to talk about, and it's the fact that independently of the institutional framework uh, that this process actually depends on, that I'm trying to convey to you, it's clear that this change in the qualification is actually potentiating by the of the integration of Dominicans based on an institutional framework of rights or through informal mechanisms where they actually violate their rights. But the process of inclusion, it's effective and real of of these migrant workers. Now, in the case of agriculture, it's a bit different. So agriculture by default, it depends on the season and on the seasonality, and it goes up and down, and depending on the demand, in function of the different of the different crop cycles. Now, in this case, it's a bit clearer the presence of a clearly seasonal workers, especially in the areas closer to the border, where, for example, the production of plantains of guineo, a lot of the workers they 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 see workers live in Haiti. In the morning, they go to Santo Domingo and they come back, and then they go. Um, this is a very interesting issue, but also there's another point that I actually want to highlight, and it's the fact that the labor of migrants that is inserted into the agriculture actually produces in certain crops a certain logic of specialization that tends to prefer certain types of workers by the producers and to discard others, and also the other way around. In the case of tobacco, for example, the uh, the harvester actually or the producer actually prefers a specialized worker that has certain experiences in handling the tobacco leaves, and also for coffee harvest. This is a task that actually allows uh, to use young workers that without risking the quality of those crops. So this is actually a very interesting topic that actually reveals from agriculture there's certain logic, partial logic, to this that qualitative actually that actually segments the nature of the demand of that skilled labor. Now, um, why don't we go over to see a few other points of the dynamics of the demand? And maybe I think it's worth mentioning that to actually recall. Maybe I have 5 minutes. Uh, okay. Well, tell you what, I'm gonna send you a study that we did, and maybe it's worth mentioning to actually indicate a a point is that back up to 1980s, migration was a classic migration from plantations. So migrants came into the large plantations and to the sugar plantations. They actually stayed within the plantation, and they actually stayed around there, and they would go back frequently. And there was also this mechanism with the military support that they actually guaranteed that they would return. Now today we have an open model, a bit less controlled, let's say, a little bit less regularized, with a greater presence in the larger economy, and it's worth to actually recognize that when we talk about the two studies carried out by IOM on construction and agriculture, we simply cannot forget that different to the previous stages, these two cases are actually part of a system of migration. We have a more diversified presence of workers that in a few cases actually indicate that we simply cannot believe that it's just agriculture and construction actually concentrates all this work. So this is a case of the informal economy. We have an important weight of female workers, female migrant workers, and the weight of what we actually call services where they actually have access to, where migration has actually had access to. So currently, the weight of migration is about 800,000 people from abroad. And half of these, I'm sorry, 500,000 of these actually are migrants, and about 277,000 people are the sons and daughters of those migrants. Second point, even though migration is predominantly from Haiti, in the past recent times, there's a contingent, there's a segment of that migration from Venezuela that's actually concentrated in the service sector. That's a very interesting point that throughout time, it'll provide a more significant role to this labor in with this pandemic. And afford me just one more minute, please. I think it's worth it to actually mention a couple of things. Is that, as Maquiavelo actually just mentioned, the pandemic has changed everything. Among these, it's had a very significant impact in migration issues, and it's actually reverted compared to a lot of people what they actually thought. A lot of decision makers actually thought, and a few analysts and that actually deal with these data. The pandemic, in a case of migration, has actually generated a reverse flow, if you will, of Haitian migrants. A lot of Haitians had actually migrated back to Haiti due to the reduction of this demand, even though it hasn't had that a huge impact. Second, the pandemic has affected especially two fundamental sectors. First off, the constructions. Yes, there has been a decline of the demand of labor of workers, which is quite significant, and the other sector is of a significant decline of the demand is in regards to services, but agriculture, even though the demand has not generated a dynamic or during this pandemic, the demand has not generated the reversion or negative reversion of the volume of workers that actually concentrate in this area. This explains partially the fact that the return to Haiti of these workers, of migrant workers during this pandemic, is not as significant. I think that the studies that we actually have and the data that is given by the government, they talk about 30,000 people that actually migrated during the pandemic. The other aspect is immigration. So immigration, evidently, the affected immigrants, they've lost their jobs, and in the two main focus of Dominicans abroad is the U.S. Basically, New York and Boston and Madrid, Spain, have seen a reduction of remittances in a very significant way. This evidently has an impact in the macroeconomy of the country in a very relevant way. And to wrap up, I would say that from the recommendations point of view, I want to indicate five just quick points. First off, in the country, there's a very strong tension in pressure in regards to regularization. This is something that's worthwhile to discuss, and unfortunately, we cannot do this because of time. But the migration law actually needs to have provisions and protocols that actually make this regulation a little more feasible. Second, there's a very strong pressure between one logic of social exclusion that exists in this country, mediated by several factors. Um, and cultural factors, and also the institutional framework. The Dominican laws in labor issues actually demand the equality of migrants and natives, of women and men. But in the practice, this institutional framework has some strong or large gaps that actually affect women and migrants. Third, as we actually indicated in the previous presentation, the capacities of dialogue between society and the state are actually quite fragile in the country, and I think there's a large task like IOM can actually play a crucial role to articulate spaces of trust that allow or enable from labor stakeholders and unions and state and business actors can actually sit down in a framework of trust to discuss their issues. And there's a very core issue, which is the role that must be developed by the National Migration Council, which is an institution that, even though it goes back, it talks about it's based on the law, that it's quite young, and finally, I believe that I think that there's a need in the country of actually improving the the political democracy from the human rights point of view, um, um, and based on the things that I just described, there's multiple things, and I've tried to compress this as much as possible, and unfortunately, due to time constraints, um, and hopefully you understood my presentation and you can ask any voids or gaps that might be left. Wilfredo, thank you so much for this very wealthy and rich demonstration showcasing the complexities of labor migration, especially from a very sensitive region from the agro and the studies sector that you actually mentioned. We believe that's a tool that hopefully other countries actually implement prospective studies that demand labor migration that we actually did with the support of ILO and IOM with coordination from the government of the Dominican Republic. Thank you very much for being with us. Hopefully you can accompany with us for the rest of the session, but we understand your position and your demands. Thank you so much. Thank you much, Rafael. So now we'll go to our representatives from Canada, Ian Gillespie. Ian, first of all, I'm going to indicate to the participants if they want to change their language of preference, they can do so, okay, in the lower left-hand side. So they can actually select Spanish or English, okay, so they can actually do this. So yeah, I'm going to switch over to Spanish right now, okay? So
share your PowerPoint, and let me just, before make a little bit of the introduction for you. Ian is the Director of Temporary Residency Policy at Immigration, Refugees and Citizenship Canada, with over 13 years with the Government of Canada. Ian previously held positions with the Department of Employment and Social Development Canada, working on a variety of labor market issues, including a lead role in implementing the 2014 reforms to the Temporary Foreign Worker Program. He has also worked at the Treasury Board of Canada Secretariat and the Department of Finance Canada. He holds a bachelor's and a master's degree in economics. Ian, thank you very much, really, for joining this session, and please feel free to start your presentation.
Okay, thank you so much for the introduction. So I recognize that this my presentation won't exactly align with the theme of the discussion. Instead, I'm going to run you through just some of the key facets of temporary migration to Canada for work, and talk about some of the specific measures we've put in place to continue to facilitate that entry in the COVID context. And I see the presentation up there now. I'm relying on our friends at the IOM to manage the slides for me, so my thanks for that. So I'm going to start right off on slide 2, which gives a really a good overview of temporary entries. So basically, my department, the Ministry of Immigration, is responsible for all work authorization, that is the entry to Canada to work, with or without a work permit. And that that determination is based on a requirement and definition in our regulations, which relates to whether there are wages and commissions being paid, and whether the activity is something that Canadians or permanent residents already in Canada could do instead. So just on the left side, you can see some examples of types of work, quote unquote, that that does not require a work permit. So these are broad categories like business visitors, foreign diplomats, transportation crew. So for example, on airlines, that don't meet the definition of work because they are in general not competing with Canadians for the positions that they are coming into Canada to undertake. Meanwhile, on the right side of that lined chart, there is the explanation of areas where, or the two main programs that we use that facilitate work in Canada with a work permit. So first and foremost, on the left side under those bubbles is the temporary foreign worker program. So in this case, this program required the most important facet as that it requires a labor market test. So that is driven by a request for an employer within Canada who basically needs to demonstrate that they are unable to find someone in Canada to fill the position, and so they're requesting permission to fill it with a foreign national. That test explores a variety of factors that includes the employer's efforts to hire within Canada, the wages that they would be paid, and were offered to Canadians when they were looking for Canadians. And assesses whether or not there is a true labor shortage for the position within the region and occupation. And that labor market test needs to be approved and needs to be positive before a foreign national can use it to apply for a work permit to enter to fill that position. Important point here on the temporary foreign worker program is that all agricultural workers that enter Canada, foreign national agricultural workers that enter Canada to work in the agriculture sector, come in through the temporary foreign worker program. So there is a labor market test for all those agricultural workers. The primary mechanism, but not the only mechanism for the entry for agriculture, is the seasonal agricultural workers stream of this program, which is based on some long-standing bilateral agreements with a number of countries that facilitates the entry of those foreign nationals. In the agriculture sector, I would just mention too that there is a pretty widespread recognition that the domestic labor force in Canada is insufficient to meet the overall demand for agriculture within Canada. So there is that continuing need for foreign nationals in that specific sector, and I'll mention that a little bit later as well. On the other side, you'll see the International Mobility Program. So this is also entry of foreign nationals with a work permit, but does not require a labor market test. So, and this can happen for a number of reasons. There's a number of specific criteria. For example, if the occupation that they will be entering or position that they will be entering to work in is covered under a free trade agreement. If that foreign national is working in a multinational firm and are coming to work in the Canadian operations. And so there's a variety of others, and I can speak to a few on slide 3 when we get there. Important point is that the International Mobility Program has both employer-specific work permits, whereby a foreign national is entering Canada to work for a specific company and only that company. But they're also able to obtain open work permits, which allow foreign nationals to work for any employer, any firm in Canada. But again, this is only for specific situations. For example, postgraduates, so recent graduates, foreign nationals who attended Canadian universities are provided the opportunity to remain in Canada and work and take advantage of their studies, completion of their studies within Canada, as well as spouses of foreign nationals who have received work permits. So husbands and wives of the foreign nationals who are already coming to Canada for work. The key point just on slide 2 before we go on is that in both cases of work with a work permit, so both of those two programs, they are demand driven. So the government of Canada is not involved in the selection of the foreign nationals that are seeking to enter. It is primarily employers to do this. That being said, in the case of agriculture, and particularly the seasonal agricultural worker program. Some country governments, or those country governments with the involved in those agreements, are involved in the selection in their own countries, so not within Canada. So moving to slide 3, this really just gives a bit more of a some of the key distinctions between the two programs. And I will note that my department, Department of Immigration, is responsible for the International Mobility Program exclusively, while the Department of Employment, or Employment and Social Development, which is akin to our Department of Labor, is responsible for the Temporary Foreign Worker Program side of it. So they are responsible for that labor market test that I just mentioned. So I wanted to make a couple of distinctions here about the Temporary Foreign Worker Program specifically. That program has some fairly stringent wage requirements, such that foreign nationals must be paid the median wage, so the 50th percentile at the very least. They can be paid more, which helps to ensure that Canadian companies are offering advertising a wage that could reasonably attract Canadians to the positions first and foremost. But it also ensures against financial vulnerability of the foreign nationals while they're coming into work in Canada. That being said, that wage requirement, the median wage requirement, does not apply on the agriculture side for the most part, where instead wages in the agricultural sector or occupations are primarily based on commodity prices, as well as a number of other factors. On both sides, both the Temporary Foreign Worker Program and the International Mobility Program, the Government of Canada conducts inspections on employers to ensure that they are meeting all of the program requirements, which you see some here, and I mentioned as well the wage requirement, the requirements to attract and advertise to Canadians, etc., as well as a number of other requirements to ensure that foreign nationals are protected, being paid the right wages, etc. And generally that employers are not taking advantage of the foreign nationals while they're here in Canada. As you'll see at the bottom, there are fees in both programs, and they are different depending on which. But again, there's a distinction here with agriculture. So as I said, agriculture occupations or entries are under the Temporary Foreign Worker Program, but there is no the $1,000 fee requirement to apply for that labor market test does not apply to agriculture. And you can see just as a last point, you can see some of the sample occupations at the bottom of the types of positions that are facilitated in each of the programs. So moving to slide 4, and I won't spend too much time on this slide, is basically just a depiction of the figures, how many entries there are on each side of the two programs that we're talking about here. So you'll see that the program is a much smaller piece, and I'll note that this is data from 2018, so it's a little bit dated, but the 2019 figures are about the same. So in total, you'll see at the top that about 340,000 work permits were issued in Canada. On the temporary foreign worker side, that was only about 84,000. And you'll see from the pie chart that about 2/3 of those work permits were for agriculture-specific workers. Now, this was actually not the case a few years ago. So the numbers on the temporary foreign worker program side were actually quite a bit higher in the early 2010s. But then there were some major reforms to that program that substantially reduced the scope and size of the number of entries on that side of it that required the labor market test. Meanwhile, on the international mobility side, you can see over 250,000 work permits were issued. Now, you can see a couple of examples here, some of them which I mentioned, the spouses of skilled workers, the postgraduate work permits. International Experience Canada is another one which is based on bilateral agreements that we have with a number of countries to facilitate the entry of foreign youth to work in Canada, but also to facilitate the travel to other countries of Canadian youth to work in other countries. You can see a few others I mentioned, intra-company transferees and trade agreements also being on there. And I will point out that the chart here reflects both all employer-specific work permits that are issued under their International Mobility Program, as well as all those open ones. So, for example, the International Experience Canada component and the Spouses of Skilled Workers component, both of those are open work permits. They're issued along with the postgraduate work permits as well. So there's actually a fairly large chunk of work permits issued that are open. So all of those recipients, those foreign nationals, are able to work anywhere in Canada for any employer. So moving on to slide 5. So this brings us sort of to the COVID context. What has Canada done since March, basically, to ensure the continuity and facilitation of foreign nationals to enter and work for temporary purposes? So Canada very early on recognized, and even previous to COVID, the critical role that temporary foreign workers play in a number of sectors. Within the COVID context, that continued and was more focused on sectors like healthcare, food production, so again, agriculture, as well as in the food processing side of food production, as well as transportation. So that being said, within the following the pandemic, Canada imposed fairly stringent border restrictions to ensure the health and safety of Canadians, but also of those foreign nationals currently in Canada, both for work and for other purposes. In particular, Canada put in place a mandatory quarantine for all entries to Canada. So that includes both, I think, like many countries, if not all of them. So that was both entries of returning citizens and permanent residents, but also foreign nationals. There were a very few exemptions introduced for that quarantine requirement, and in particular for critical workers in healthcare and essential transportation. Worth noting that for foreign nationals entering for work, employers are required to pay for the accommodations of those migrant workers during their quarantine period. Another restriction that was introduced, and with very limited exemptions, is that all foreign nationals seeking to enter Canada for without a work permit, so that first tranche of individuals that I explained at the top, such as business visitors, foreign diplomats, etc., cannot currently enter Canada, because at the time, or as of right now, those entries are deemed to be both optional and discretionary, and so they're not currently allowed. So I mentioned that there are very, very limited exceptions to that, and it's generally done on a case-by-case basis. Canada has, as you'll note on this page, we put in a number of other measures to facilitate foreign workers to enter and work, which I'll speak about in the next 2 slides. Important point here, I think, is that we're continuing to work with our provinces or our subnational governments, as well as cities, our municipal governments, employers, unions, and other migrant worker support organizations and other partners to continue to ensure that foreign nationals who are in Canada to work are safe and healthy while they're here. So moving on to slide 6. These are some of the measures that Canada has put in place to facilitate the entry of temporary workers. Are sort of enumerated here. So, for example, we've allowed for more time for foreign nationals to submit additional documentation to support the requests to extend their existing work permits. We've introduced an exemption for our biometrics requirements, so things like fingerprints and eye scans. So within the past few years, Canada introduced this requirement that all foreign national entries to Canada submit these biometrics information. This requirement's currently been waived in Canada, just to limit the risk of in-person interaction at the Canadian facilities that collect the biometrics information. In cases of job loss, so when a foreign national loses their job, for example, if the employer has laid them off or is gone out of business, or for other reasons, those foreign nationals are now able to apply in Canada for a new work permit if they have found if they have a new job offer. So if an employer has offered them a job. previous to COVID, this was not the case. So previous to COVID, if a foreign national lost their job, they would normally they would revert to visitor status within Canada and would not be allowed to apply for a new work permit. Foreign nationals are also provided now in the COVID context with flexibility to restore their temporary status. So either renew their work permit and also restore their visitor status if it has lapsed. If it lapsed around the time of the onset of the pandemic, when there was which kind of recognizes a lot of the confusion that people were more focused on the health and safety, and so these types of things were recognized to have happened. Moving on to slide 7. And just to make the point there, on slide 6, those were measures introduced for foreign nationals currently within Canada. While this slide, on slide 7, these are the measures introduced to facilitate entry for foreign nationals currently overseas, so outside of Canada, but seeking to apply for work permits and enter Canada for work. So first and foremost, and this is more of an operational point, Canada is prioritizing work permit applications in those critical sectors that I mentioned earlier, so agriculture and other agri-food production, as well as transportation occupations such as truck driving and critically healthcare occupations where there's a strong need. Similar to the measure for in Canada, the biometrics collection requirement is currently exempt, where currently, previous to COVID, there were work permit, foreign nationals applying for work permits would have to provide that biometrics information to one of our missions overseas and in their own countries. So that requirement is being waived for the same rationale of limiting the in-person interaction. We've also permitted the use of what we call foil-less visas, so removing the requirement to have visa stickers in people's passports, visa stickers. We're also working closely with foreign governments ongoing to ensure flights for those foreign workers that are coming in are taking place, and that also workers have the right documentation to get through and get on board those planes. It's worth noting as well that our processing capacity in general has been reduced given the pandemic. So we're continuing to work with our government partners to prioritize, in particular, critical sector work permit applications, and also to mitigate impacts on other areas. And I'll just wrap up here. I was trying to keep it short. I think the bottom line for Canada is that we recognize that foreign nationals, temporary foreign workers, have a big impact and make a strong contribution to our own economy, and they fill important gaps in our domestic labor market. As some of the other panel members mentioned, they also, we understand and fully recognize that they play a very important part within their own countries in sending remittances back to their families. The border restrictions and exemptions that I mentioned sought to find a balance between our Canada's public health and economic imperatives. We're continuing to monitor the effectiveness of these measures, and we're looking to adjust them when necessary. And we're doing so in consultation with our national department colleagues, as well as subnational governments in our provinces and municipalities. COVID brought to light for us as well some of the key gaps in these programs and the requirements of them on users, and that is, and by users I mean the employers. The requirements are generally intended to ensure foreign nationals are adequately protected while they work in Canada. But like I said, I think COVID brought to light some gaps in that regard. This was, I think, particularly the case in our agricultural sector, which I've mentioned a couple of times. And we're continuing to work with our subnational partners, with migrant worker support organizations, unions, and employers to address these concerns and ensure that Canada remains a safe place for foreign nationals to work. So I think I'll leave it there. Thank you so much, and I am looking forward to answering any questions you may have.
Many thanks, Ian. Thank you very much for this very informative and very comprehensive presentation. I think I would like to highlight the emphasis you made on the role of the employer sector in coordinating with government the processing of work permits. I think that's a very good example of how these two sectors, two stakeholders should and must work together. Thank you very much, and hope you can stay up to the Q&A session so you can answer some interesting questions from the participants. Ahora me voy a introducir a don Mauricio López. Don Mauricio nos acompaña hoy.
So now let me introduce Mauricio. Mauricio is here in representation of Costa Rica to actually present the experience from Costa Rica and the implementation of the decree that actually allows to regularize migrant workers in the agricultural sector. Mauricio Lopez, he's an attorney with over 25 years of experience in the profession. And since 2012, particularly, he actually works in the General Directorate of Migration of Costa Rica and as be the key person of coordinating the implementation of this very important decree. Mauricio, if you could open up your mic, please, and I'll share your presentation. Renan, can we just make sure that we have Mauricio's audio feed? Okay, so I think we have a technical issue with Mauricio with his audio feed. Let me see if he comes back in. And there we have. Look, I'm sorry. I don't know why. I've been logged on. I've been listening to everything from the previous panel members. I didn't leave. I didn't leave at all. I was just here. So good morning, everyone. Good morning, everyone. It's a pleasure to actually greet everyone here in San Jose, Costa Rica. Let's see. This decree is a type of it's kind of like a remedy for a very big problem when we actually closed down the borders due to the pandemic. On March 16th of this year, we actually closed down the borders from the country. No. So this decree, if you can go to the next slide, please. Costa Rica depends on foreign labor for its harvest throughout history in the country, but this need actually came on in the past 25 years.
Esa mano de obra es necesaria para fortalecer la producción, ¿verdad? Y además, desde el punto de vista sanitario, regularizar a esas personas le permite al Ministerio de...
So this actually, I apologize if the signal went out. So this actually allows to actually follow up on those people to control their health in terms of the pandemic. Look, I'm trying to be as fast as possible. I'm with my time. Look, so this decree actually consists basically on actually providing the possibilities of regularizing all those foreign workers that once they're actually in the country, once living here for several years, they haven't been able to actually regularize their situation. So based on this decree, the key is to actually reach out to all those people through collaboration methods to so that these people can actually regularize themselves in the country, and actually allows the agricultural and agro-exporter and agro-industrial sector to actually regularize those people and to use them as workers in the sectors, and they can actually supply the demand of labor, and that they can actually use the protection measures from the pandemic. So what do we actually want to foster with this decree, or what do we want to do with this? The decree is actually indicates that all those people that came into the country between January 15th of 2016 and January 15th of 2020, that they were here regular in the country, that actually stayed in the country, they can actually request their permanence in the country from, they actually participate in this category, migration category, that we've actually, that especially was created through the implementation of this decree. So all those people can actually demonstrate that they've been in the country before January 15th of 2020. They can actually participate in this category. Next slide, please. So this foreign labor is going to be regularized, and they can actually stop being irregular from the migration point of view, and they can actually request health benefits is from the CCSS, which is Social Security Bureau of Costa Rica. They actually regularize or allow the Social Security of these people based on this new status. So this is going to allow the agricultural sector to provide a food sustainability to the country, and the great majority of products that are actually being guaranteed, and this is due to other economic circumstances, basically what are important for the country, are actually to allow the exporter sector to continue to actually harvest the products and to provide the necessary treatment to actually be exported. Now with this, like I mentioned, the issue of the different produce and vegetables and whatnot, obviously it's for domestic consumption, but pineapple, melon, watermelon, and especially coffee and bananas actually needs to be exported. It's not necessarily for domestic consumption, but needs to be exported, and this ensures to the state, the government, the collection of the necessary and respective taxes or tariffs, especially during the pandemic where the economy has been tremendously affected. This also allows the national sanitary activities through the CCSS and the Ministry of Health jointly to actually provide traceability to actually mitigate the effects of COVID, because these are people that have many of them actually living in Costa Rica, and they already have roots in Costa Rica, and they haven't been able to actually regulate the situation in Costa Rica, and they actually work in the agro sector. So this actually allows to strengthen in interinstitutional coordination with the private sector, and to jointly seek the benefit from those workers, and also from the businesses that actually hire these people, and also for the exporters and for the food sustainability, especially during this pandemic, where we're actually in this pandemic that not just actually they send us to work from home, but it's actually changing the world from our points of view. Now, with this said, this new category, which is called SETSA, which is a special category for temporary workers from the agricultural, agro-exporter, and agro-industrial sector, actually provides rights to that person to actually stay in the country during a period of 1 year. So the main consequence of actually applying this category and approved, of course, is to provide a permit for 1 year, renewable for 2 more years, based on the date of issues, to actually work in agricultural and agro-exporter or agro-industrial sectors in a way that that the requirements that are actually demanded do not go beyond of affidavits of birth and of roots in the country, and they're actually workers from the agricultural sector of the country in such a way that they don't actually leave the country to actually obtain birth certificates, because since the borders are actually closed, if they leave, they cannot come back in. So, and these are people that already have roots in the country. That's why we actually put that term, because of a normative regulation. We need to establish a term in which they actually need to apply. Any person can actually apply that's lived in the country since before 2016 can actually apply if they actually prove that they've been living here and they have roots in the country. Now, with this said, this is actually divided in 2 areas: those workers that have an employer, and those that do not have an employer but actually dedicate to agricultural works because they actually do it independently. In other words, they actually rent a plot of land, a piece of land, and they actually produce something, or a coffee harvest, or pineapple and melons. And during the year, they actually work. They don't have a fixed employment, employer, but they actually work on their own independently. So if that a person of that foreign national actually wants to apply for this migration status and participate, being an independent worker, then they need to be registered with the Ministry of Agriculture and Livestock, or Animal Husbandry, with that characteristic that they're an independent worker, and the Ministry of Agriculture and Animal Husbandry, they actually have the proper controls for that foreign national. Now, who are the beneficiaries of this? The benefits that I actually mentioned, because of the economic and the tax collection and traceability and mitigation of COVID. We also see those people benefited, and also the employers, because they already have regular people or regular workers. The Ministry of the Ministry of Health. If they don't, when they actually do an inspection on a farm or in an industry, and they find that there's workers or irregular migrants that are contributing to the CCSS, the Social Security Bureau of Costa Rica, then they actually proceed to actually issue a sanitary order and actually close down those plants or those farms. So this actually allows the employer to actually avoid or prevent that closure. So there's a guarantee of food supply, and public health is actually benefited because of agricultural production and their crops are going to be harvested and is guaranteed. Now, which are the stakeholders by this decree? This decree. This was issued last June 28th, and by the President of the Republic, and together with the Ministry of Agriculture and Animal Husbandry, and the Ministry of Governance, that actually belongs to the General Directorate of Migration. Now, exactly what are the other stakeholders? It's salary workers and independent workers, any foreign national that has roots in the country, that's lived in the country since before January 20th of this year, and that is actually working with a long-term work permit, or if they do this independently, like I explained before. And also the employers also benefited, but we also have social groups and union groups and community development centers that we saw in the Caribbean sector. We saw the participation of the Catholic Church actively participating in this, and there's some other organizations that are actually supporting the workers so they can actually obtain this migration category. So the terms of the application of this started on June 22nd and ends on September 22nd of this year. This term can be done in 2 days. They can actually call the call center for an appointment enabled by the center, and or the employer can actually organize and coordinate with the Ministry of Agriculture, from the Ministry of Agriculture, so that they can actually coordinate the presentation in a massive way for all the workers. Now, the validity term from the CETSA, they need to resolve those applications 3 months as of September 22nd. So they have September 22nd to resolve that. At 4 o'clock yesterday, we actually received the 3,553 applications at immigration rather, and we actually issued like 2,500 appointments. So we have more cases than appointments. So we have 71 extension agency offices that I think can attend to this. So on June 24th and 25th this year, we actually had a marathon of different webinars for showing them how to actually receive the requests, or the applications rather, and how to actually form that case file, and how to actually submit this submit this to the migration department or ministry rather. So we have different agencies that actually receive these case files, or directly coordinating with the producer, so the producer can actually have that case file and submit this to the ministry from those 71 different field agencies in a coordinated way. Like I mentioned, right now the General Direction of Migration has received 3,553 case files. So there's a direct coordination to respond to the question that was given to me when I accepted the invitation to this webinar. They actually asked me to talk about how we actually coordinate this with the agricultural sector and what's the relevance in migration matters. So it's quite interesting because it's coordinated, and as when this is resolved, with the category resolved for someone specifically, it's the ministry who will be in charge of this to actually capture the picture of that person through an application. We can actually document that person, and implies to issue that document that it's a type of identification card. So that person can actually be identified as an agricultural worker, and they have a permit to actually work in that area during the following year, or during its renewal. So the DGME, the General Director of Migration, has actually they've actually we are going to analyze and resolve the request, and we coordinate with the ministry the issuance of these IDs that accredits this category, migration category. The employers are how will they contribute to actually avoid big clusters of workers at the ministry and our different 5 regional offices from migration. The employers can actually collect collect those documentations to actually open those case files, and this will actually ensure that they are not going to issue those sanitary orders due to a large cluster of people showing up at their offices. And other organizations from civil society that they will also have coordinated with the extension offices and submit these to the ministry and also to our offices. So basically, this is it on my side. So this is something else that I want to mention. It's not in my presentation. There you go. My camera activated right now, so it's great that if I activate. So it's something very important that I see had to mention, mentioned by Michaela Maquiavelo, is that since August 20th of last year, in regards to the exceptional opening of the southern border with Panama to allow the entry of the native population of the Nobe Buble native population to Costa Rica. It's been 25 years that they've actually collected coffee here, and it's been exclusively done by the Nobe Buble native population coming into Costa Rica from Panama. So we talked to ICAFE, the National Coffee Institute, and according to them, they estimate about the 2 million baskets of coffee are actually collected a year. And so this exceptional activity authorized by the government of Costa Rica actually allows the controlled entry of the Nobe Buble native population into Costa Rica, together with the National Coffee Institute and a lot of producers that are actually interested in this labor for these people to come into the country, and also together with the Ministry of of Health, and also from the National Office of Migration of Panama. They were actually coordinating so that these people could have two basic forms of ID from Panama to come in for the category of temporary worker uh, from a native person. So, okay, those documents they have a binational health ID, that they had a sanitary control and epidemiological control from the departure from their home, from the um, from the natal settlement where they actually live in Panama, and in order to access the borders in Costa Rica. And then we have all these controls, and we have that binational ID. That's the first requirement. They need a waiver issued by Panamanian migration, which is a native waiver that they come from the Noble Buble native population, allowing them to come into the country. And the other is that they and any native that wants to apply to this, they must know the name of the owner of the farm where they're going to work. If they don't know the name, then they will not be allowed into the country. But if they do know the name of the producer, they will know this. And the Institute of Coffee is already coordinating with that producer, can have a transportation vehicle to take them directly to the farmers. Now, the farm owners, they've been notified so that as soon as they are issued with this migration category, those people should receive a sanitary order that they must be in the quarantine in the first farm where they'll be harvesting the coffee. So this will actually generate a larger bubble. So I apologize, but look, can we maybe expand your presentation in the Q&A section, because we have almost no time. But thank you so much for your explanation of the Costa Rican case. Thank you so much, Mauricio, and I apologize for interrupting you. So we'll conclude the panel. We'll finish the presentation from Andres Soto by Manpower Group. Andres Soto, he's from Manpower Group. He's a general country manager from Guatemala and member of the Junior Achievement of Guatemala. And he was also account manager for Manpower in Costa Rica and the Caribbean, and also sustainability manager from Manpower in Panama. So he's done psychology major in Costa Rica, and also international business from INCAE on projects from the OEA, and also quality leadership projects from Quality University of Panama. Andres, thank you so much for being here in this panel member, and please, you have the floor. Thank you so much, Fabio, and I greet everyone who's with us today. Please let me know if you can see my screen. Yes, I can see it clearly. So thank you once again. So a premise that I actually want to start with my presentation is that the world is so uncertain, that today we're seeing the situation and everything that COVID is all about. We talked about the process of robotics and automation of things, and it actually jeopardize the process of employability, and also that population that's economically active, directly active. The need of people trained or of labor is quite broad, and we've seen this throughout the years. But we see it coined that people cannot adapt to the speed that's required for this. And from our business side of view, we actually based on connecting people with talent and the companies that actually have employment opportunities. Now, before COVID, we were seeing challenges in terms of how to determine a correct strategy to attract staff, and how to train and to actually close the gaps of the challenges I actually mentioned. Identify if we have the correct talent, and all the process of digital updating, and to lead through the different transformation processes that we're actually seeing today. Now, understanding the situation, I think that in terms of diversity, it's quite easy to see the benefit of having people from different origins and different characteristics when we actually carry out business and to connect globally. Now, we've actually been able to see this in the past 70 years due to our experiences in 80 different countries that we actually been working with suppliers, clients, and associates and candidates from different parts of the world. And we actually base our success in terms of expansion of business has been based on that precisely of having inclusion policies applicable, realistic, and completely adaptable to the realities of each country. Now, within the SDGs of 2030, the idea is to not leave anyone behind. But as we see, certain groups are actually vulnerable when they actually develop the inclusion process of a dignified life and access to human rights. Now, this is important to actually highlight and to be very clear that historically diversity has been managed from very diverse extremes, from an exclusion very well marked to segregation. That we see this in terms of apartheid, or in the U.S., for example, directly to integration processes that actually solve the refugee camps, for example, in different locations around the world, but they don't use completely a program of inclusion that truly accepts and values and can actually integrate the entire knowledge of the people that actually come into the country and to the host country. Now, when we actually talk about inclusion and integration, it's important to actually see this in a different perspective, because it's not going to contribute to the business and to people if it doesn't go through an execution process. And we talk about active inclusion. A clear example that I want to use, and it could be kind of cliche, is that if someone talks about a party and you're gonna go out and dance in this party, so we're not gonna leave anyone behind if we can actually include those populations that are being left behind because of some of the reasons. Now, it's important to actually consider the concept of intersectionality when we actually execute policies or inclusion programs that are real, because it's not the same in terms of perception and treatment when a white man actually sees compared to a white woman, or it's not the same of reality over barriers or privileges that a white woman lives compared to an Afro-descendant, a young woman. And if we add something that if it's an Afro-descendant woman that's over 50 years old, or in terms of religion, for example, when we include those characteristics of a 50-year-old woman that's Muslim or Afro-descendants, or a non-traditional religion in terms of Latin America, for example. So this concept of intersectionality, it's important to define policies that truly actually are deep to sustainable changes and change of culture and to carry out a business. Now, under this line, and I think it's a first process that we must be clear on, because there's a paradigm in how to enable and how to actually use this information according to PwC. The majority of people, we actually want to be part of this change, and we actually want to have a positive footprint in the world. Now, 86% of people actually say that the policies on diversity, equity, and inclusion are important when making a decision. However, on the other side, it's more than 71%. They don't feel, or they don't think that the organizations have that equal opportunity for everyone. So it's a challenge of how it's being perceived and what efforts to this date have been developed for this. Now, in terms of lack of talent and focusing on the solution from the migrational flow perspective, like we've actually been seeing, basically we have two answers to this. The population which is economically active in countries that actually host these migrants are actually going down. The countries that are being developed, maybe 60%, and in a certain way, their population is actually aging. So these countries, developing countries, actually contribute their talent in terms of economic activation, and on the other side, the benefit for the countries that promote or generate this process, migration process, is actually release the burden in terms of employability and local opportunity. And number two, actually receive the benefit, economic benefit of the remittances that are sent. Now, within our business line of business rather, this has been increased. When we talk about employment opportunities, we will separate access to talent from the complex skills and basic skills. Now, the overoffer of resources of labor with qualified capacities that are not as complex basically actually generate the base of this period that we see over here that actually promotes and generates unemployment. Like I mentioned before, the demand of talent by companies is being more specialized and implies more complex skills, and up to date are not being covered in the past 13 years. And according to our studies, the lack of talent that we actually carried out globally, as of today, more than 54% of the companies have challenges to find key talent for their operations and according to the business needs. Now, with that said, in Latin America, we can actually say that 51%, 52% is 51% is concerning in regards to skills. For example, we see that the most important positions are for manufacturing and skilled labor and administrative management or office management. So this is the way that that we can explain and understand. Like I mentioned, from this double-sided coin, we need to actually have congruent solutions in regards to skilled and available labor in terms of response times. Now from Manpower Group, like I mentioned, we've actually differentiated and we actually defined our strategy of sustainability based on 3 pillars. Number one is to help young people to understand where the market is going and where the future opportunities, and on that line they can have or make more informed decisions in terms of where they actually want to go with their career. Number two is a bit focused on the here and now, where we actually help those that are today are actually working to maintain themselves employable. It's important to actually adapt and to actually learn ongoing education and to feed to actually learn and unlearn. And if I have two processes and skills that can actually promote, so that these people can actually keep and or stay employable in the labor markets. And lastly, but not least, the third point implies all this that I actually mentioned of actually integrating all these populations that have been left behind maybe, and that in the countries they actually turn vulnerable. Now, within this cultural inclusive process, basically the intervention matrix obviously I have to contemplate diversity, the different conditions of that are going to be basic in terms of the inclusion process. We must consider the pillars and the strategic parts and the values that the company will develop. And by joining this, we will actually maintain a sustainable inclusion process. Now, there's a roadmap that I want to share with you, which is how we're focusing on the Mexican standard from 2015. Actually indicates 4 quadrants in terms of how to facilitate the labor equality and the process of eliminating discrimination. Now, within the labor equality, we're going to see practices within Manpower Group that are actually defined a specific policies and actually train on unconscious biases that leaders sometimes they actually see the value generate to actually listen to other options. Evidently, the process of training in terms of inclusive language, for example, are actually important practices within our pillar. In terms of social provision, we talk about policies that benefits our staff. We actually want to seek, for example, maternity permits or licenses that actually promotes the distribution of practices or productive practices within the home, and also nursing rooms as well. And basically working with the teams and understanding how they're actually seeing or living through the pandemic, the psychosocial support that we can actually see that actually generates certain triggers when they live in the same household. So in terms of family and work and all one place, and accessibility and ergonomics, that actually helps to actually work with this workspaces. Look, I apologize if you have 3 minutes. In terms of culture, it's going to be the trigger for this change. I want to show you the roadmap for inclusion that provides diagnostics in regards to policies to generate certain internal micro influencers are going to define the different practices that are being carried out. And lastly, in terms of attraction of talent of a Manpower Group, we're actually fully aware that the form employment has a capacity of change the world. So it's a basic roadmap that we should all consider. And I actually want to show you very quickly the issue of what a positive aspect that we have in Manpower. One is a recommendation is to actually having visible commitments directly. In this way, it's evidenced from the stakeholders and partners and clients and the possible collaborators of the commitment and the focus provided by the company in terms of gender equality. We actually ended up first this year from the award that we won in Mexico in 2020, where we actually including and certified by the Human Rights Consulting directly of best practices in regards to gender equality. Now, about gender equality, we actually have we have about more than 58% of our leaders are actually females, actually women. A situation that we've seen from Monica Flores, who are the president, and it is for a lot of positions in Latin America. So it's important to actually evidence the commitment from the CEO or from the president downward. The practices, like I mentioned, of responsible paternity, that it's quite important. In terms of talent, we have this program called My Path. What it does is that it actually seeks so people can actually continue receiving training, and it's not the clients are not going to pay for this. So we have an operator that for a project in the process that we train, and they can go to operator number 2, which means a 20% increase in their salary. It responds to the needs of the talent of the company where they're actually working. So this way, we see help to continue feeding the process in the mentality of skills, so that the people can actually continue to be employed, and the company can actually have access to the key talent. Now, in terms of connecting people with skills, we actually carry out employability studies. With this information, we have access to actually advise the companies and the programs developed in terms of employment. So example of this is the efforts that we have in Mexico with the UHCR and Comar, where she mobilized southern people to Tijuana in regards to displacement. So in one way, they can actually have the opportunities of work. Another is at the border of employability that we have in Panama, with Hayas, with UNCR, with the municipality of Panama, and also to promote the inclusion and the resilience model of refugees and migrants and young people in vulnerable positions, so that we can actually have sustainable answers to employment. And the benefits that we'll see definitely are going into the re-youthening of the active economic population in tax and local economic reactivation, and also in terms of remittances. We talk about actually access in visible talents, and the inclusion actually generates innovation, and they should generate the sustainability of the businesses. When I can actually contribute to this platform, to the people, to feel part of this, we actually improve the brand's image and the client trust and collaborators, and also the cultural inclusion and a lesser rotation. We have more specialized people in productivity. Evidently, we have the opportunity to actually invest in that I had to invest to actually maintain the operations and focus on ideas and new technologies to actually carry out this business. So on my behalf, this is my presentation for today, and definitely to actually achieve diversity and inclusion is humanly possible as long as we can actually coordinate the efforts from the civil part, from the private business part, NGOs, and directly with the governments. Thank you. Thank you so much for sharing this very interesting experience, especially in regards to recruitments. Due to the 5 minutes that we have, the 5 minutes that we have left, just be ready if you have questions. And Luis Alonso Solano has the floor to actually start with a very short 5-minute Q&A session. Thank you much, Fabio. Thank you so much, the panel members. And I just want to welcome to the RCM and the best of luck to his new endeavors and migration. Also to Ian Gillespie, Andres Soto, and Mauricio Lopez, and Fabio, and Micaela Machiavello. So we only have 5 minutes for this. We need to maximize our time. You could do this through the chat. You could just write down your questions or comments through the chat, or any comments you might have. And Virginia Negro, she has a message. So Virginia, if you can actually request to speak, and we'll allow you to come in and ask your question, your comment. Virginia. Virginia Negro, are you there? Okay, there we go. Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, everyone. And it's quite interesting, all the presentations that we've seen. In honesty, is just a quick comment from Mexico, because in Mexico, what we're actually trying to do with the labor migration mechanism to Mesoamerica is precisely, there's my camera, there you go. It's precisely to open a space to this cooperation between the public and the private sectors. So I believe that right now it's very important to actually have that to concentrate ourselves on that point, and to focus on this coordination, to strengthen the coordination, and to open spaces to all the different public and private services in the labor integration of people, of migrants as well. Now, just a very quick thing that we're working about 1 year with the Secretariat of Labor and the National Service of Employment in Mexico, which is our national counterpart, and also with the private sector, and a work of coordination, interinstitutional, but also a work of technical support in the management of the documentation and the management of all the different issues that might arise due to the integration and inclusion of migrants, and as well as in terms of the interculturality within the companies. The truth of the fact is, sometimes we have certain difficulties, of course, because we also have the geographical areas that actually change, and it's quite interesting to see exactly how we have different needs, but also it's a work that is strengthening the capacities of the different companies as well as from the governments. And it's wonderful to see how we can see an important stakeholder like the private sector is actually starting to actually take a social stakeholder role and what it should be, and to actually accompany. It's an honor to be here to accompany you in this, and that's my comment. Thank you so much for today's session. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Virginia. Thank you so much for your comments and your contributions. We know that the private sector is quite important in these in other sectors. So we will pass the floor to Adriana Hidalgo from ILO. Adriana, are you there? You can go in if you want. Adriana, your microphone is off. I think the same issue we had last time. You're still on mute, Adriana. Yep. There we go. Now we got you. Yeah, I was at the Matt open my mic over here. I apologize, but thank you so much. I just want to congratulate everyone and the panel members by the excellent presentations that we actually seen. I do want to congratulate the new director of migration from Dominican Republic. And I also want to make a quick question to the director of migration, as well as to the representative of Costa Rica. And it's in the sense that it's evidence the serious need of actually articulating the migration policies with the labor policies. And in this regard, based on the experience from the migration decree in Costa Rica, how was the incorporation of the different sectors from the labor, from the ILO and the workers' representations with the government and negotiation of this? How was this participation of dialogue and the involvement? In the case of the Dominican Republic, I think it's to see exactly what's a perception on having this dialogue, this three-party dialogue that can be developed to promote labor migration policies that are a bit more integrated. Thank you so much, Adriana. We don't have Lozano, the director of migration of the Dominican Republic. If you are there, you can join our panel member, but I know if he's not there, we can have Mauricio Lopez for Costa Rica. Thank you so much, Adriana. It's a pleasure to actually meet you. Let's see. So the dialogue with the different business sectors and with the association has been with migration. It was done with the Ministry of Agriculture. Let me tell you that the decree was posted on April 23rd, and due to a situation, it was about not to be published, and that's why it was delayed to the 23rd. I understood that. And we actually had the experience last year with the decree 4643 from the Ministry of Agriculture and Animal Husbandry and Governance, that it was a decree that was very similar to this 42046. It was very similar, but just with a bit more rigid. But it wasn't as successful as we thought it would be, precisely because we needed that interaction between the Ministry of Agriculture and the sector specifically. So as a matter of fact, I think there's only about 25 categories approved within the category that we actually had from this different decree. Precisely, immediately we see the decree was actually was published, and we had a very long work day to see exactly how this decree was going to work. Was just not with the personnel from the MAG, but also from the producers directly, and a lot of employers actually interested in this. I remember that the deputy minister of agriculture actually talked to the pineapple sector that actually wanted that their harvesting period that goes beyond January, they actually wanted workers to actually help them with the harvesting of the pineapple. The same thing goes from the pineapple sector, from the watermelon sector, because this decree was not done for harvest, but to regularize the migrants. So based on this, we actually generated this interaction of questions and answer. And it was, we started at 8 a.m. on a Monday, and we actually ended on Tuesday, 6 p.m. But the interaction was quite strong, and to actually explain and with other chats, I've actually answered a few answers because they continue to actually ask. With the deputy minister, I was actually mentioning to her last week in the southern part of Costa Rica that most likely they were going to give me a badge for the Ministry of Agriculture because I've actually been working for the Ministry of Agriculture and for the producers since June onward, precisely because the interaction has been so strong, a constant source of information on how to regulate and how to obtain and how to show that they have those roots in the country, to show that this category it can be a success. And we actually expected 5,000 people, 5,000 foreigners that actually wanted to be regularized. Now we're about 3,050. So we have 18 business days to actually conclude the period to receive this document. So I think so far that we're actually on a good path over here. Thank you so much, and congratulations for the effort. And we see that's been accepted quite well. Now we have Leanne Dixon. You have the floor for your question. If not, Laura Canche, if you're there, you have the floor for your question. Laura, if you can tell me exactly where you're from what organization you're from, and your question. Laura, if you can open your camera and your mic, please. And also Virginia Neira, she sent a link of the campaign that she mentioned in the chat. We also have Laura Canche. Laura, you have the floor. If not, Leon Dixon. If not, well, I want to thank everyone for the minutes for the extra minutes. So please join us in this next session next week, and on September 2nd with the International Cooperation for the Labor Migration Management and the Economic Recovery. So Fabio, you want to say something? Yes, we never do this, but particularly I want to ask Ian something specifically because I think that's related to the exercise that we've done in the Dominican Republic. Ian, in this coordination that you actually do with the private sector from the employment sector, you also use a certain analysis, prospective studies, or analysis of future demands of migrants. Is that a resource that you actually use in Canada?
Maybe just a couple things. So I think, well, so when I was talking about the programs are demand driven. So to say that we're coordinating with employers, I mean, so we have a lot of conversations with employers in varying sectors. We do have information, and to be honest with you, I'm not fully up to speed on the information that we track on the foreign national side, and I'm not sure to what extent that information is actually used within the context of the labor market tests. The information that I was referring to was about on the domestic side, so within Canada. So particularly in the context of that labor market test, we use data statistics about from surveys that our statistical organization does, where there are shortages and surpluses of labor within the country by varying sectors, regions, and occupations, and we use that information to inform the labor market test, and so we're able to say with some degree of confidence, although recognizing that no data and no labor market information is perfect, but with some confidence we can determine whether or not there is a true need for someone to come in from outside of Canada to fill a position. So I'm not sure if that fully answers your question, but
Thank you, Ian. It was perfect. Thank you very much.
Muchas gracias, Ian. Estamos
So thank you, Ian. Thank you, Fabio. Laura, you can send us your question. If not, then we want to thank Lozano from Ian Gillespie from Canada, Andres Sota and Mauricio from Manpower, and also IOM and Micaela and Fabio that they've actually helped us with organizing this webinar as of today. And of course, ILO, PNUD, and IO and OIE. Please accompany us next week. Laura Canche question says she's from IOM Mexico. Can you talk about the employment campaign with the Secretary of Labor? So the private sector for Mexico of migrants and inclusion of migrants and the conditions for the regular hiring in Mexico. All the information is in the IOM website of Mexico. So just visit IOM's website in Mexico. And we will definitely post a link with all the presentations from all the members today, panel members, but all webinars, including next week, so you can accompany us. And if you go to our to the RCM YouTube channel, you also have access to all the videos from this year. Fabio, if you want to wrap up, so are we done for today? Yes, thank you so much. Also, I want to thank our Micaela, who actually opened today's session, and the panel members, of course, that they actually helped us today, and the agencies that we actually organize, ILO, PNUD, Luis and the Secretary, the Renan, the interpretation, and all the colleagues, and we'll see you next week. Thank you so much. Thank you. Thanks, Ron, our interpreter, and the control masters. Thank you so much, everyone, and have a great day. Goodbye, everyone.
Hasta luego.